Hello guys, welcome to today's section. Today we'll continue with our banking application API. We have handled implementation of user registration, creating response utility class. We've also, in the previous session, we also handled how to actually format our response and how to send proper response to the users, both in if you are in pre-development and production mode. So if you want to learn more about how to handle your exceptions, you can please visit the previous lecture or the previous session. So today we'll be moving on to authentication, and what we'll be using for authentication is Laravel Sanctum Token. So Laravel Sanctum Token is basically just a token that is generated for you to authenticate your users. So if we move down to the documentation, you will see an explanation is provided for us. Laravel is a featherweight authentication system for sparse, single application, mobile applications, simple token-based APIs. Sanctum token allows users of your application to generate multiple tokens for their accounts. These tokens may be granted abilities and scopes. So basically, a token is generated for you, and once you generate the token, you share it with either or with the client trying to access your API. So you can either use it to, you can use it for authentication system for Spark applications, that is Vue.js, React, Angular, name it, any Spark applications. You can also use it as a source of authentication for your mobile applications, Flutter, React Native, Android, basically. So, and you can also use it for token-based API. For example, let's assume we want to make our application, our banking application API public, and we not necessarily public, and we want to make it public, and we want to allow users to be able to access it by via the token we have actually generated for them. So they register with us, then we generate this token for them, and they can use it to log in into the system and to communicate with the API. So you can also associate the abilities that a authenticated user can perform in the system. So let's say, for example, in as much as we are exposing our APIs to these users, we don't want them to be able to, we only want them to be able to create transactions, but they can't delete. So you can add all these abilities in the token generated. So the way the token is generated is when a token is generated, it is saved in the database. So if we go to our database, our banking application database, if we open it up, you notice that we have the ID, the tokenable type, tokenable ID, name of the token itself, then the abilities, the last time the token was used, when it is going to expire. So you can, these tokens have expiring dates, right? So that means you can extend the expiring date to as long as you want. You can increase it to 100, you can increase it to 1000 days, depending on you, and you can reduce it maybe to like 30 minutes. Then you provide a way for the users to be able to refresh the token for them to be able to refresh the token before the expiring time. So basically, we'll be using this to authenticate our users that are going to be trying to, when they sign up, they also have to have the ability to actually log in into the application. So when they log in into the application, this token will be generated for them, and it will be attached to the authorization header. As they say, Laravel Sanctum offers the infrastructure to storing the user API tokens in a single database, authenticates in incoming requests via the authorization header using the bearer token kind of way. So yeah, now that we have covered explanation on how to actually make use of Sanctum token and why we are actually making use of Sanctum token. I know there are other form of method that we can use. We can use JOT, we can use all of these JWT, we can use passports, OAuth, but Sanctum token just make it easy, and it will make our development much faster. So let's get back into the coding scene. So in front of me is our authentication controller, and on our authentication controller will be, this is where we'll be putting in our login requests, our login request implementation. So if we go to our postman, so let's create the method function login. It will be public, although it is, I like to attach it just for. So our login, we are going to be requesting users to send their email and password. So let's generate the email and password. So if we a little email and password request class login, oh, sorry, login request $request. So in our login request, we require true, we require email, password, oh sorry, required, then email. That is all. For our password, it should be required, and it should be a string. We can set it to a minimum of 4 characters, right? So the next thing is let's go back to our authentication controller. So let's try to hit this login endpoint from our postman. Where is our postman? Okay, let me rearrange this. I don't like this arrangement. No, no, it's not what I want. Okay, I know what to do. Yeah, this should be properly arranged now. Yeah. So if we come back to our postman and try to hit the login endpoints, don't forget that I already have a variable in my postman that is setting the base URL, bank statement API / API. And I also like to let you know that I'm using Ed, so you can try it out. If your system cannot use Ed, you can try Valet. So it's pretty nice UI. So pretty nice macOS application that allows you to have the basics of PHP for you to run PHP applications installed. So as you can see, we have not created the URL, and that's why we are getting not found. But I don't like the idea that we are still getting HTML, even though we've already set it that if the user is expecting JSON, we should send JSON. If we set it to application.json, we should get a JSON. So you can see we will not undo your request. Please try again later. So let's do something. So let's undo the exception. So if we check what is the exception that is being thrown, let's see what's the exception that is being thrown. It is happening in abstract route exception. Okay, so let's go back to our code and go back to our handler where we undo exceptions. So as you can see, it is not going into this expect JSON, and that is because Laravel is expecting that is either it is an AJAX request, PJAX request, or any content type, um, or wants JSON, which um, all of our all of our and none of this actually satisfies what we are trying to do. So what we are going to do now is we are going to go back to our handler. So we are going to append an or and say if string contains helper from Laravel, we want to check if our request URL URL. Let me see if I can get. I'll just see parts. Yeah. Let me try to see what is inside this parts. DD parts. Let me try to hit the API. So we can see paths. So we can check if our request paths. You can check if our request paths contains API, which is what we are looking for. So as long as the URL is /API, we'll always return JSON. And if it is not even /API and it is expecting JSON, which will also get that. So so the next thing is, so let's see what the type of exception that is being thrown. Just before I did let me just did before the logging the error. So if we come here, so we can see what we are getting is not found exception. That's the exception being thrown. So we can undo this exception gracefully. You can say if exception instance of not found exception. Let's check HTTP kernel exception. So not found HTTP kernel exception. Let's see that we are HTTP Symfony component HTTP kernel exception. So we can say return. We can say return return this dot respond API response, right? In our API response, no, this is not what I want. In our API response, we are expecting all of this. Let me just copy this. So let's see this. So let's say exception. Let's see the message being thrown by the exception. Get message. The status code. I think we are good with the status code being returned. It will be a not found, which will be 404. Exception get status code. Yeah. This will be, we don't need errors here. It is not a validation. Then I'll say exception gets status. Right. Okay. Exception gets status code. Wow. So if we go back, yes, nice. So we can see the route API login could not be found. So we are getting a very nice exception. We are getting a very nice exception now. It has been formatted. So we see our 404, we get our 404. So this is pretty nice. So let's go back to our, so let's set up the exception. Let's set up the API. So our API for login. Let me copy this. Login. We are going to call the login endpoints. So let's hit our this thing again. We are still getting not found, and that's because we have a prefix of auth. So we need to add /auth. Then when we hit it, let's hit our endpoint again. Now we are getting a very good so I know that our email is required, our password is required. So let's get into it. Raw application.json. So we say email, let's say johndoe@gmail.com. password. Let's set it as password. So we log in. Now we are not getting anything. So that means we are passing validation now. So if we go into our validation, the first thing we need to retrieve is all the stuffs that we need. So we can retrieve the validated data by saying $request validated. So we can do $credentials. So this will contain our email and password. So you can see we are getting our email and password like so. So now we need to, if we go back to the documentation provided to us by Laravel, if we go to issuing tokens, so we can see the first thing is we check if the email and password exist. Otherwise, we return an error that the email, the provided credentials does not exist. So what we can then do now is we can do, so let's just copy that piece of code here. We can check. So our request, which will be our credentials, email, right? So let me put query here. That should help. So yeah. So now, so we did the user. Let's see, does this user exist? No, the user does not exist. So if the user does not exist, we want to say if $user does not exist, we want to return $this dot respond. Let's say send error or send what error code should we send here? Let's just respond send forbidden is 43. Oh, okay, let's send error. We say our error will now be can say the provided credentials are incorrect. Provided credentials are incorrect. Then we can return 400. Oh, let's leave it as 400. So if we go back now, you see, very nice, provided credentials are incorrect. So you can't tell the user, it's not appropriate for you to tell the user that maybe the password is wrong and all, just send it that private credentials are incorrect. So we can then go ahead to perform our authentication. We can do if auth dot attempts with supplied credentials is false, which so behind the scene, this will help us to check if the user has provided a valid email and password. So with this, we can just decide to remove this. We don't even need this. Sorry. We can actually remove this. I don't need this anymore. We don't need this. We don't need to do that round trip. Laravel can just help us to undo that. So we can say if the attempt, after attempting to check if the credential supplied is correct, we can. So if it is correct, automatically Laravel ingests the currently authenticated user into our requests. We can easily get the authenticated user like so. We can do the user. So if we come back now, it will see that we are still nice and pretty good. So so now what we are going to do now is let's register this user. johndoe@gmail.com. Register. Okay. Johndoe at Youpmail. Let me use Youpmail password. Let me register. Okay, the email has already been taken. So let's wipe our migrate fresh migrate fresh. Yeah. So our database is clean now. There is an email system that we can use, Youpmail, which is free, disposable email address. So we can generate a email of our choice, johndoe at you johndoe. So if you come here, we get a nice and easy Youpmail that we can use to register. So Youpmail. Now user is registered, then we can go ahead to log in. Let's try to log in. Okay, perfect. So we can see now we are getting our user, the user is authenticated. So the next thing we do now is we create a token for the user. So token will be user creates token. So we can we can just call it auth token. Can call it auth token. Then we get the plain text, which is basically what is in our Laravel documentation as well. So we can then respond, return request, respond, send success. We contain the user, the freshly authenticated user, and the token. Then we can attach a message to stay. Let's bring this to a new line. So we can say logged in successfully, like so. Login successful. Let's bring this nice and easy. So login successful. So if we come back to our so we can see we could not undo your request. Try again later. Call to undefined method. Create token. Oh, thank you. Create token. New access token. Plain text. Oh, plain text token. That's the correct. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. So we get our token now. So this token is what our users will now be using to log in, and they can be using to access authenticated routes. So this is how so if we go to our database now, let's go to our database here. Go to our database, check so you can see now auth token, we have the token rise, and although it is encrypted, so it won't be the same as what we are getting. So that's a very nice way to actually get users login and have them logging into the system. So the next thing we need to implement now is so let's go to API. Let's say if our token will actually work. So let's do this. let's try to access the currently authenticated user in our system. Let me format this. Let me close this. Let me close the database. Let me reduce this. So let's get the auth user. So if you are going to get the auth user, you have to wrap it in the middleware of so we have to wrap it in the middleware auth sanctum group function. So we can say route. All right, to be a get request, of course, you say user authentication controller authentication controller. Then we'll create user method. That will be the name of the method. So let's go to our authentication controller and create a nice method. Call it user. Okay. So be public. So we can return. So we need to get access to the current request coming into this system now. Request. Let me remove. Okay. Request. Right. So return. So let me just copy this. So we can easily say request user booking. So we can say authenticated user retrieved successfully. I don't think I know this. So let's set it to JSON response. JSON response. So if we come, let's try to create another auth user. Let me call it authenticated user. So if we come here, URL / auth / user. If we try to access it, we should get route API. Yes, still have an error in our route API. Let's see. Okay, that's what we need to do. Unauthenticated. As you can see, we are getting unauthenticated. So the reason why we could not undo your request, please try again later, is because we have not undid when an exception for unauthenticated is thrown. So let's go back to our handler. So this message that we are getting is from, we could not undo your request, please try again later, is one of these two exceptions that is holding it together. So let's try to see the type of exception being thrown. Let's check. Yeah. So it is authentication exception. So we need to undo that as well. If exception is instance of authentication authentication exception, all right, we can say return. Let's copy this. Let me remove this. That's why. Yeah, so much. So let's see. Let's try to code, get code, get code. So let's try to see the message being returned. Maybe we'll be fine with it. Status code 0 is not valid. Okay. Okay, we are getting 0. Okay. Anyway, for authentication exception, what naturally we'll be looking to actually return, you can either return 401, which is unauthorized. So we can say for response is our response helper status processable, let's say unauthenticated, unauthorized. So let's copy it as well. Okay, let's just get some status code. Nice and easy. So we can status code. So that's so if we come back here now, you can see we are getting unauthenticated, but I'm not satisfied with that message. So that's where I'll be changing it to you can say authenticated, or is either the user is unauthenticated or the token expired. Please try to log in again. So expired. Look, please try to log in again. So I believe that message is much more descriptive. So unauthenticated or token expired, please try to log in again. So unauthenticated or expired. So the reason why we are getting this error, so let's attach our token. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write a little script that I usually use to automatically set my GWT token whenever I'm working with API on whenever I'm working with API on Postman. So what we are going to do is we are going to what we are going to do is we are going to inspect our PM Postman environment. This is just a script. You don't need to memorize it. I already have it. Token. Well, I want to set token. So in my environment variable, I want to set the token from the response coming, right? JSON. We are expecting a JSON response. And so as you can see, I'm expecting the data coming from the JSON response. Then okay, to be result dot token. So let's see if this is correct. If I try to log in again, confirm, you can see, yeah, I have the token updated now. If I try to log in again, the new token is there. So that way, every time I log in, my token is automatically set. So if I need to use the token, I can just come here and say token, and it will automatically be attached. So as you can see, we are able to retrieve the authenticated user. So now let's move to on logging out. Let's log user out of the system. Let's go back to our authentication controller. So that is pretty easy. Let me just copy this, paste. So called logout. So what we are going to do is so the first thing you need to do is you retrieve the authenticated user equals to request user, right? Then you either remove a single token. Let's check the documentation. So it's either you remove all tokens that are associated to the user, or you remove a particular token. So if you do this, all tokens that have been generated for the user will be removed throughout all through the system. But since we don't have access to the particular token the user is supplying, so we just say token. So we can say, let's just copy this. So we delete the token. Once the token is deleted, we can send an empty. So we can say logout successfully logged out successfully, like so. So let me just bring this to a single line. So that we've logged out our user. So let me go to, we're still getting some error here. Wow, is this method name already exists? Oh, we pasted it twice. So let's go to our API route, set up our logout. So our logout can only be accessed if you are authenticated. If you are not authenticated, you should not be able to access the logout endpoints. Logout. Logout. So if we go back to our Postman, since we are logged in, so let's add the request for logout. URL/logout. Attach the bearer token. Logout could not be found. Okay, it needs this /auth. Now, get method is not supported, of course. So let's see. Should we use post? I don't think so. Let's use get is just enough. Let's do this now. Very nice. So user has been logged out. So if you come back and try to access an authenticated user, you get unauthenticated or token expired. Please try again. So that's to be the end of today's tutorial, today's session. So we explained how Sanctum token can be used. We've explained how you can use it to authenticate a user. We've explained how you can log user out from by removing all their Sanctum token. If we come to the database, if we come back to the database now, you can see the user does not have any token in the system again. So that is basically how Laravel Sanctum tokens, and that is how you can use it to authenticate your users. So that will be the end of today's session, and I hope you enjoyed it. So please, if you enjoyed it, please share, like, subscribe, and continue to follow me on the journey to building our banking application API.